Hey, Jake.
Hey, Carrie.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I fixed Siri so it wouldn't respond to me saying, hey, Carrie anymore.
I love that.
Yeah, I love it too.
So, other things that I love are you like crazy. You love me. I'm the best. I also read a book and I'm really, really excited to talk to you about it.
Wait, we're talking about a book?
I can't believe we read a book, Jake.
I know.
I had so after my summer class ended, it turned out basically 2 weeks before my fall classes started. And in those 2 weeks, we read a book, which was A Song Below Water by Bethany C. Morrow.
And this was a book that I got from this thread, which I retweeted on the...
At Love YA Pod, is that what we are?
Yes, that's correct. At Love YA Pod.
Look at that.
Good job.
Haha.
So someone tweeted that her son's going into 7th grade, needs a book to read this summer, gets really mad if there aren't significant characters of color in it, and asked for recommendations. And there were a ton of recommendations in the responses. And one of them was this book. It was actually published this year on June 2nd.
And we're going to talk about it.
Yep. A lot of spoilers in this.
A lot of rambling in this. I don't know if there was much swearing. I think there's a little bit on my part, but definitely this is a book that is a little bit disjointed, so maybe my thoughts might follow.
Yeah, and mine too. But let's get to that discussion. Is there any particular place you'd like to start?
I mean, I just sort of want to talk a little bit about the world building in this story. So this is recent fiction, so it's set now or close to now, probably, at least 6 months ago, because people are gathering in groups. But there are some major differences from our world and theirs that, there are sirens, there are sprites, there are other magical creatures or magical people that are in this book. So it's a really interesting, sort of this world, but not sort of world building. And I really liked that. I also liked that Ren fairs weren't considered dorky. I really, really liked that. That they were just sort of they were a place that people experienced magic or magical realism. And it was kind of cool that it wasn't oh, this is the dorky thing that white people do.
I mean, it's a little bit like that. Like Effie, who is the one who's really into Ren fairs in the book, said that she is, I think, basically the only Black person at the who performs at the fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, it seems like a very kind of rich narrative kind of place. So have you been to Renaissance fairs then?
Have you met me? Of course I have. Yes, I most certainly have. King Richard's Fair and I, we've met.
So I have to confess that I've not been to one.
Oh my God, if the world wasn't ending, I would totally make you rectify this.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that that I've talked about with some friends, but then we never, or at least I never got my act together for it. So is it, my impression is that in our world, that they don't really, that there aren't really mythological creatures at the Renaissance fair in the way that there are in the book. Of course, in the book, mythological creatures exist in the real world. So, but is that true, or am I wrong about that?
I mean, there are certain things like they may actually have a tank for the mermaids, like they do here.
Oh, okay.
Things like that. And sort of like they had the gargoyles that were people dressed up as gargoyles. There may be things like that, but it is often, wenches and knights and things like that. And, heaving bosoms, terrible, terrible bad jokes, etc., etc.
Sign me up.
It's fun though. I mean, just whatever you do, don't wear flip-flops because it's so dirty and gross and you're going to get, it's just, well, actually, you know what? Maybe flip-flops are the best idea because then you can just hose that shit right down. I don't know. I don't really know what the right answer is. I just know that it's usually in a field. It's usually kind of hot. Usually smells a bit. Kind of fun.
Cool.
But it's not as fun as the one that, now I'm going to probably butcher how to pronounce this, but is it Euphemia or Euphemia?
I don't know. There are a lot of names here that I'm not totally, that seem like they have multiple plausible pronunciations.
Okay.
I was thinking Euphemia. That's sort of what I was.
Okay, so we'll just go with Euphemia. So in this when she's at the Ren Fair, she's Euphemia the mare or mer.
That was definitely one too. I was like, mare? At first I was thinking mare, and then I was like, well, it's short for mermaid. It's probably mer.
It's probably mer, but as I was reading it, I was always calling her Euphemia the mare. But it's probably mer, so...
Otherwise it sounds a little like a horse.
So Euphemia the mer. Sorry. My train of thought completely derailed because I was too busy focusing on how to fucking pronounce it.
No, I think you were saying that the Renaissance fair in the book seemed like cooler, or
yeah, it seemed cool. Like, you know, it's not like the Renaissance fairs that we would go to here, where it's sort of probably the same joust every day, year after year, the same stories, the same tales told. They build the story as they go, which I think is really interesting. So her mom was Minerva the Chosen, and she had her story. And so they've got this whole mythology that they've also built into the fair as well, which I thought was really, really interesting, really cool that, you know, it's not just like this stale thing where you go on Tuesday and you go on Thursday. You're going to basically see the same fair, but things evolve. And there are certain things that, you know, they sort of happen, you know, time after time. You know, Euphemia and Euphemia's gentleman caller, you know, they have their courtship that happens, you know, sort of year after year, but it's also still evolving as the story progresses.
Yeah, and we gather and eventually find out kind of more definitively that there's someone or some group of people who meet in a tent called the Hidden Scales in Vancouver, Washington, which is where all the stories come out of. And Effie's like big dream is to get to go into the Hidden Scales and help shape the stories there. Mm-hmm. And she sort of does, but not in the way she expects.
Not at all. So basically what we've got two best friends who are closer than best friends. You know, Tavia is the main character, or at least the story is told from her perspective. She's not necessarily the main character. I think they both are.
It alternates.
It does, but I guess because it starts with Tavia, I sort of think of it as Tavia's story. Does that happen to you? Where when you get the next narrator, you're like, who are you? I didn't ask for you.
Yeah, that can happen.
So yes, they alternate, but I still think of it as Tavia's stories because I'm an asshole.
Sure.
And she says, you know, we're sisters. And from then on, I was like, yep, you're right. You're sisters. Done. Full stop. Mm-hmm. So the two sisters, one of them is a siren and the other one is non-magical ? And is Euphemia the mer at the Ren Fair.
Yeah.
Sirens are not considered cool in this world. They are the opposite of cool.
They're viewed with a lot of suspicion. They tend to try to hide their powers and their identities. They're all black, which is not true of all of the mythological races. I don't know what to call them.
People just don't like that. Basically, sirens can tell them what to do.
But it's also...
It's racist as fuck.
Because there's another race, the Iloko, who are I don't know if that's the right word either, But in our world, they are a mythological creature in Central Africa. A 30-second Google search told me that they dress in leaves, have grass in place of hair, and can open their mouths wide enough to eat a human whole. And they carry a small bell which can be used to attract it and bewitch humans. So most of that is not true in the world of the book, but they do have the bell, and they are, they basically can enchant humans. Humans think that they're incredibly attractive and interesting. And contrary to sirens, everyone likes them, basically. Although that's questioned a little bit. But compared to sirens, they're very well liked.
But of course, is part of their Aloko-ness that they make people like them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're well liked because they're a loco, not they're well liked because they're a loco. If that makes sense. It doesn't make sense. No, I mean, it's not that they like the Aloko in specific. It means in general, the Aloko are well liked because they're also able to use their powers of influence.
Yes. And so one of the things that's said in the book that was not expanded on, and which I thought about more than, I'm not sure how much the author wanted me to think about it, but I thought about it a lot, was that there used to be non-black sirens, but there haven't been since World War II. No explanation is given of that. It's just a fact.
Well, I'm guessing they were rounded up in the Holocaust.
So many questions. So were they all in Europe?
I'm guessing they were all European, and they were all murdered.
I mean, I guess I was thinking probably something along those lines. But
I mean, you would think that there would be somebody who would have escaped at some point, but there may have been it may have been that they were just so rare, and
yeah,
I don't know. But it just makes it seem like, yes, they were all murdered.
Yeah. And at one point, one of the characters refers to a study which showed that sirens whose identity becomes known have a much lower life expectancy than those who remain secret, which has, obvious real world analogies to life expectancies of, Black people, obviously, trans people, definitely. There are a lot of groups who don't necessarily fit into the mainstream the way they ought to, whose life expectancies are much lower as a result, because the world sucks.
The world sucks hard. So marginalized groups in this world are both Black people and sirens, of which Tavia is both. So she fucked. And the book sort of explains, or not explains, but the book shows what happens to sirens. The book sort of opens up with Tavia being at the pool watching her sister swim, and she checks her phone and she sees that a siren had been murdered.
Well, it wasn't even that. It was that a Black woman who had been murdered, and she had been murdered by her boyfriend. There had been some protests about it, but it had been largely ignored by the media. The boyfriend had been put on trial for murder and accused his dead, murdered girlfriend of being a siren. That was his defense.
Oh, that's right. His defense was basically, oh, she told me to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, fuck you. No, she did not. Nobody would do that. Nobody would use their fucking powers to get you to slaughter them. But okay. And that defense kind of worked. Yeah, that defense kind of worked. So fuck that asshole.
Yeah. So she's going to look at a hair care channel hosted by a woman named Camilla Fox, but YouTube instead directs her to a video about this new development in the trial, which You may remember, Carrie, I sent you a couple of random notes that I made.
You did.
One of them was the algorithm.
Yes.
And it basically, I wondered a little bit about this, and I don't know, again, I don't know that the author intended this, but it made me wonder, like, does YouTube know that she's a siren based on her viewing habits or something? Because she goes to look at her favorite videos, and then this one is just like right there at the top.
Possibly, but at the time, we didn't know that Camilla was a siren. So she just really liked watching this chick do her hair because she learned how to do her own hair. She watched her, do these really cool things. She watched her do twists and watched her do all these things. And she's like, fuck yeah, this chick does like really good shit. I really like it. But we did not know at the time that Camilla was a siren. So I don't know if the algorithm would have given her other siren-based information.
Yeah, I know. It just sort of like reminded me of those stories you hear, which I'm not sure how true they are, but like of like a drugstore starting to send a family coupons for diapers or whatever, and it turns out that the daughter is pregnant.
Oh, snap.
A report in the New York Times says Target's sophisticated computers are able to guess when a woman shopper is pregnant based on 25 items that pregnant women buy. Among them, vitamins, zinc and magnesium supplements, and cocoa butter lotion. Toss in extra large clothing or a rocking chair, and the store decides you are pregnant and starts targeting you with baby coupons. But the New York Times says an irate father asked a Target manager why his teenage daughter was receiving baby coupons in the mail. Turns out his daughter was pregnant and had told no one at all. But she had been shopping at Target for products that an expected mom typically buys.
So Rhoda Taylor, who is the victim of domestic violence, is the first other siren that we find out about. Roughly on page 1.
Pretty close, yeah.
And then Camilla Fox later comes out as a siren in reaction to various events, I think, including Rhoda Taylor's boyfriend's siren-based defense. She comes out as a siren. She's, got 3.5 million subscribers. And so that's like a whole thing. And then there's one other siren we know of who we never meet in person, who stars on a reality TV show called Lexi on a Leash, which is about a siren who has taken to wearing a collar that suppresses her siren voice, which apparently is a thing that the police would like all sirens to do.
There's also one other siren that we don't meet, but sort of meet, and that's Tavia's grandmother.
Let's see. I think lived in a different state from Tavia, and they never met.
Correct.
But if your grandmother's a siren and you're a woman, then you also are a siren. Tavia's father is the obvious link here, and he is totally ashamed of or / frightened of the way society will view sirens. And his favorite show is Lexi on a Leash, and he really wants Tavia to like keep her head down, not do anything that might get her noticed. Or reveal that she's a siren.
But then they've got this giant gargoyle on their roof.
Yeah, that's a thing.
So, he's trying to keep his head down, trying to keep the two girls like out of trouble, trying to make sure no one notices them, make sure no one ever notices that Tavia's a siren. Yet this gargoyle keeps roosting on their roof year after year.
So I guess that isn't really associated with sirens per se, but Tav's father, Rodney, is like just super paranoid about anything that will make them stand out.
Yeah, because if they've got something magical on their roof, maybe they're magical.
Yeah.
And if they're magical, why are they magical? So, anything that's going to keep them from being noticed is going to be his jam. So he'll do everything in his power to try to get that gargoyle to go away. And that gargoyle ain't going anywhere because it's a goddamn stone monster.
And it has a task. So let me ask you, Carrie. So you said if someone is magical in the house, then who is it?
Well, that's a great question.
Isn't it, though?
Yeah, because, when did that gargoyle start showing up?
Coincidentally, it was shortly after Effie started living with them.
Huh. Well, Effie's not magical, is she?
I mean, no, like she's got her skin that kind of flakes off. She's got hair that moves around without anyone touching it or any external cause. But, these things happen maybe.
And, she's had some incidents that have included sprite activity.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But it certainly wasn't her. Not as a child. No.
No, she's the lucky one.
She's the one who got away.
Right. The other ones all got turned into stone.
Wonder how. Wonder why.
Yeah, it's odd. Like when you think about someone whose hair moves around of its own volition, and then their people turn to stone. I don't know. Does anything come to mind? This is a tough one. She's a Gorgon. She is. Yes. Both you and I were like, Medusa.
Medusa. Hello, Medusa. How are you? Well, at first I thought maybe she was going to be a real mermaid.
Yes.
That was my first thing. It's like, oh, her skin's coming off and she's going to have mermaid scales underneath and she's going to be a motherfucking mermaid. And then the hair starts moving on its own in the pool and scares the other fucking, it was Naima, I believe, who's a loco and a total snatch basket.
Yes.
Her hair starts moving on her own. Naima's like, what balls? And I was like, oh, she's a Medusa. Got it. High fives. Then I had to look up, what kind of animal is a Medusa again? Am I a dum-dum? Yes, I am. So then I was like, oh yeah, that's the word for it. High fives.
Yeah.
So we have not one but two magical creatures in this house.
Yeah. So we figure out pretty early on, or relatively early on, that she is a Gorgon or something of that nature. The people in the book,
they don't think that they're real.
Right. That's what I kind of like about it, is that we in the real world are like, well, mythological creatures are real here. So obviously Gorgon. But the people in that world are like, yes, sirens are real. Mermaids are real.
But that's a step too far.
Yeah. But I mean, Gorgons, no one's seen those in centuries. Those are extinct. It would be like if you found out that a friend of yours was actually a woolly mammoth or something. You'd be like, what? No.
That would be awesome.
I know. That was the other thing you would think, which actually, come to think of it, that's what Tavia thinks also when Effie sort of assumes her final form.
Yeah, she's not afraid of her at all.
No.
This is her sister. And she's like, holy shit, you are badass.
Like the description, I was like, Jesus, this sounds horrifying. And then Effie is like, I've never seen anything more beautiful. I was like, oh, wow. Okay.
I mean, that is like pure, true friendship right there. When you see your friend turn into a goddamn magic snake and you're like, I'm in. I love it.
Yep.
What it's doing to your hair. Fabulous.
All right, let's go find your dad.
Find him and kill him.
Well, if only.
Because he's a chode.
He's the worst.
Yeah, so a bunch of fucking things happen in this book. Like, a lot of things happen, and nobody talks. So I think this is one of those books that I think if people really just sat down and had a conversation, maybe things would be okay. People aren't telling Tavia, anything about her heritage. They're just telling her, keep your head down. You're part of the network. They'll keep you safe. But at what point is safe not good enough anymore? Safe only gets you so far, and her powers are getting stronger.
Right. Both of them, both Tavia and Effie, are kind of reaching an age where they find it harder and harder to keep their powers under control or hidden.
I mean, Effie didn't know about hers.
Yeah, that made it harder.
And so hers is a really, difficult transition for her. But Tavia's like, my dad won't talk to me. He's embarrassed of me. He's ashamed of me. He, all he wants to do is keep me safe, which is great, but what does that mean for me? And her mom is the same way. Her mom's not a siren. So she's like, I don't know what to do with this. But no one's talking to her, Same with Effie, her grandparents, Mama Theo and Pawpaw. They're trying to keep her safe by keeping her with Tavia, but they're not talking to her about who her mom is, who her dad is. She'd ask all these questions. Who's my dad? And they're like, an asshole. Cool, but what does that mean? If you think that it's possible that this may come up, and obviously it does when your playmates are turned to stone, I'm just like, yo, you people need to talk. But no one's talking. So people are talking around them. People are having conversations around them saying like, oh, the adults are talking. But the people who things are happening to, they're not being included in the conversation. And it makes me really, really fucking mad.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So I guess ultimately, what we're told, and it took me, piecing it all together was a little tricky for me. I don't know. Other people who are smarter than me might not have that experience, but as far as I can tell, I think Effie's parents probably met through the Renaissance Fair.
Yes.
And her mother was adopted, but I don't think we have any particular reason to think that she had any kind of supernatural powers. And her father was a Gorgon who lived in the
Hidden Scales.
Yeah, that's the one. But anyway, they met and fell in love, and they had this child. And then there was a question of like, well, where is Effie going to live? Is she going to live in the, basically in the Hidden Scales, in this sort of water world with, I guess, the only other Gorgon in existence, as far as I can tell? Or is she going to live in the human world? And it seems like her parents disagreed about this. So ultimately what they agreed was, we're not going to tell her anything. She's going to live in the real world until she's at an age where she can decide. And the grandparents hated the idea of her being a Gorgon and didn't want her to have anything to do with it. And so definitely would not tell her anything about her parents or anything.
Let me just ask you a question.
Sure.
Do they have a fucking choice?
Yeah, totally. No, they have 100% a choice.
I guess what I mean is she's going to be a Gorgon or she's not.
Oh, yeah.
They don't have a choice in that. And so them saying like, oh, well, we just don't want her involved. We just don't want her to be a Gorgon. Well, tough.
Yeah. I think I got that actually wrong in my little summary, which may indicate how much difficulty I had figuring out how this worked. So I think the idea actually was that she would reach an age and either turn out to be a Gorgon or not.
Yes.
And to be able to control it or not. And then at that point, she would decide what to do.
Because even if she wasn't a Gorgon, they could have raised her in the Hidden Scales, and I guess she just would have been like a cool, weird kid who grew up in a magical tent. But the grandparents, they didn't tell her anything. And I'm like, were you trying to just stop this process from happening by not telling her? Probably, but also, like, it's going to happen. If I consider it like magical puberty, like, it's going to happen whether you want it to or not. The fact that they just kept not telling her really pissed me off.
Yeah. And then her father, so like they just don't want, they're hoping, that basically it's an out of sight, out of mind thing, that if she doesn't know, then her powers won't emerge. But meanwhile, her father is trying to tip the scales in the other direction, because even if he can't talk to her, he can still be around and sort of provoke her powers to come to the fore. Like, he is there when she, at the age of 11, I think, turns 4 of her friends into statues. And it's said that, he influences her to do that in some way that I didn't totally understand, but I think basically magic, right? So fine.
Yeah, maybe his magic being there amplifies her magic. I don't know.
And he also not hires, but he gets the Gorgon to go and like keep an eye on her.
The gargoyle.
Yeah. And I think spy on her to some extent.
Yeah, he's there to spy on her. He's there to protect her, make sure nothing happens to her. Because, that's his property.
And the gargoyle kind of betrays the father and starts instead like trying to protect Effie from her father's influence. And the grandparents also eventually send her to stay with Tavia's family because, we'll skip that bit for now, maybe. So then she stones another guy at her mother's grave.
She sure does.
And her grandparents freak out and are like, this isn't working. Sending her to be with a siren isn't doing what it was. We're going to take her back and lock her in her room forever. Appears to be the plan.
Yeah, it was.
That's no good. We don't like that at all.
But she's going to go to prom, hell or high water.
Yep, and she does. She goes to prom with Wallace.
And who's Wallace?
Wallace, it's interesting.
Wallace is a guy. She met him at the pool. Seems kind of nice. Bit older. But
I believe Effie describes him as someone who would be in high school in a show about high school. So,
can I make a really bad joke?
Yes.
He's a stone fox. You love it.
I do. I was going to say he's Luke Perry, but yours is better.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Wallace is this guy who is always wearing sort of the official pool merchandise. And so everyone thinks he's a lifeguard, but he isn't a lifeguard.
He also goes with them to the protest, because there's a protest for Rhoda Taylor's death, where Camilla is making an appearance. He accompanies our fine friends.
There's so much in this book.
There's so much in this book. I'm like, oh yeah, and that happened. Oh yeah, that part. This is going to be a beast to edit, I know, because I'm going all over the place. But it's like, oh yeah, that thing. Oh, and then the cops, and then this. And, oh yeah. So the protest. The protest was some bullshit. I mean, and by bullshit, I mean, oh, that sounds really scary, and those people are really, I'm proud of them for going, but also some of their friends were dumbasses.
This book was published in June. Which I don't know how publishing works, but I assume it means it was finalized,
last year.
Yeah, last year sometime. So it's kind of interesting that it takes place in Portland, and the protests that are described there are basically what we see on the news every freaking day.
Yeah, pretty much.
With like the peaceful protesters, the police in riot gear, they're
just out for blood. That's all they fucking cared about. They were like, oh, you're peacefully protesting? Cool. I'm going to bash your face in.
And so that is like captured, I mean, maybe a little more resonantly because of what's been going on, but I just feel like it's pretty harrowing.
It was eerily accurate.
It's really freaky. Like everyone is sort of there, like they're a little freaked out, but they're also like kind of having a good time. They see Camilla Fox is there, and it gives a speech, and it's kind of inspiring. The police start moving in. Everyone starts freaking out and panicking. Things start to go really bad. Unlike real life, a Gorgon comes and whisks away our heroes.
Gargoyle, not Gorgon.
Good point. You're correct.
Yeah, so the gargoyle has not befriended Tavia, but has sort of let Tavia like talk at him, and has talked back a little bit, and has even taken her on a ride, basically over the ocean. But at this point, suddenly, from out of nowhere, they're whisked out of the protest, and they're flown out into the woods. Well, that was Effie's first time riding with him, right?
Yeah, that's right. I just keep thinking of different plot twists that we haven't talked about yet. I'm like, oh my God, this book. So, yeah. And it turns out that the gargoyle has taken them away. Not so much because of the protest per se, but because Effie's dad is there, invisible, and apparently is going to...
We don't know this, though. Like, we just think, as we're reading the book, we're like, oh, he's taking them out of there to keep them safe from the protest, but that turns out to not be the case.
Yeah. One of the things that I found kind of fun towards the end of the book is, so they find Effie's dad, and Effie is kind of like suspicious, but also sort of poised to reconcile with him. And then Tavia is like, just sort of goes full Columbo on it. It just is like,
well, listen, there's one more thing.
So when you were at the protest, were you going to make my sister manifest her powers and turn like 100 people into statues right then and there? Was that your plan? Yes, that was his plan. He sucks.
Yeah, he sucks so hard. Like, why would he want to do that to her? That's not a way to drive someone into your arms. If someone made me like turn 100 strangers into stone and then made me feel like shit about it, yeah, that's not gonna make me like want to be your BFF. She's already got a BFF. Fuck off.
Yeah.
My favorite part of the whole book. Can I tell you about it?
Mm-hmm.
So the two girls, they're whisked off into the woods, and Gargi, which I hate that she calls him that. I hate that Tavia calls him Gargi because he won't give his name.
Yeah.
Gargi is sort of guarding them, just hanging out with them, and they are talking like so much shit because neither of them really think that the gargoyle can talk much or understand what they're talking about. So they're just talking.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh, snap.
It's pretty fun.
I loved every minute of that because it's not revealed until later who the gargoyle is. And then when we found out, they're like, oh, shit, he heard all of that. Oh, my God.
Yeah. So let's talk about this.
Yes.
So Tavia, so the gargoyle, who I'm not going to call Gargi, the gargoyle takes Tavia and she is able to commune with the lost voice of her grandmother, her deceased grandmother. And she learns a new, I don't know, call or voice, because there are two siren powers that everyone knows about. These are all things that they can do with their voices. One is to compel. You can compel an action. Another is to appeal, where you are able to appeal to someone and be very likable. This also allows you to find out what they find appealing, which is why she never wants to do it for her dad, because she feels like she knows what he finds appealing, and
it's not her. So she goes with Gargi on a little trip, and she learns a third one.
It's called Awaken.
It's so cool.
And so tell me what Awaken does, Carrie, because I'm not sure I totally understand it.
Awaken can do two things that we've seen. Awaken can sort of help a friend, helps them awaken their true self. So when your friend's skin is peeling off and her hair is moving on its own, it may turn into a snake lady.
It might.
But it can also do other cool things.
Yeah. And before we get to the other cool things, I want to mention that she does use it on one person who as far as we know, isn't magical. During the protest, she uses it on her friend Altruism, who is one of her classmates. And she is in the middle of the protest and freaking out and scared and wants to run away. And Tavia uses Awaken on her. I played too much Dungeons and Dragons. I'm like, casts a level 2 Awaken spell. I don't know. And Altruism, like, sort of, I feel like it like centers her and makes her realize, like, okay, why am I here? What am I doing? And we don't really get to see all of the consequences of that, but it seems to like sort of calm her down and center her, and she stops freaking out. But at this sort of key moment at the prom, the best, like, this prom is terrible. All proms are terrible, but this prom is terrible. Actually, I went to prom twice. It was fine.
I went to prom a bunch of times. I had a blast.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, all fictional proms are terrible.
Correct.
I mean, this reminded me of a movie that I've never seen that I know you have, Carrie.
I might have. And yes, it most certainly did.
Because, so they meet up at the prom. Let's see. Tavia drove there, I assume. Effie got a ride with Wallace, who broke her out of her room where her grandparents were keeping her prisoner. Jesus Christ, people.
And her grandparents are just like, you know what? Fine. Just go. Jesus Christ. And Papa was pretty cool about it overall. And Mama Theo was just like, she was pissed.
So they're at the prom. Effie's nemesis, Naima? I don't know how that name is pronounced either.
Naima? Yeah. Naima.
Who's a loco, who knows that Tavia is a siren, starts talking shit. Reveals that Tavia is a siren, which is super a thing that she is not supposed to do ever.
Yeah, the only people who know at the school that she's a siren are the people in her choir, because the loco sort of help the siren be able to sing without like they're like, oh, here's the place where you can actually let your voice out. So these people can help you like hide that they're part of the network. And it's sort of known like, hey, y'all, like, you got to keep this secret. But Naima is now dating Tavia's ex-boyfriend, correct?
Yes. Priam.
And Tavia's ex-boyfriend is a total chode. And he got freaked out by Tavia, and his dad's a cop, and like,
God, this book
has a lot going on in it. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry that you're going to have to edit all this, because I'm just going to keep going. So like all these things, like these people who are being asked to help Tavia keep this secret. And Naima's just like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be a fucking asshole. Effie didn't like that.
No. So she's sort of advancing on Effie. Wallace has kind of interposed himself between them to sort of protect her from Naima's being a total jerk.
Oh, because she's also like recording this on her phone at the same time. So she's broadcasting to everybody that Tavia is a siren. Because she's a complete asshole.
100%. And then Tavia uses the Awaken power.
Mm-hmm.
And so at this point in the book, we think, okay, Effie is going to turn into a Gorgon. Like, we're prepared for that. We think that's what's going to happen. We assume there will be bad consequences of that, but that's sort of what we're expecting. And that does happen. But, man, this is some crazy shit.
Tell me about the crazy shit, Jacob.
So Effie does turn into a Gorgon, like she becomes a snake.
She becomes a snake, which I kind of was not expecting. I was not expecting that suddenly her legs would fuse and that she would get gigantic. I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting that. But she went like full Gorgon.
Full Gorgon, no stars. But this is kind of obscured because Wallace also transforms into a giant fucking gargoyle.
He sure does.
Wallace was the gargoyle all the goddamn time. And I was like, what?
So as you know, like as I was saying earlier, as the two girls were like talking mad shit about everything, and Wallace is the gargoyle just sitting there going, huh.
Yeah.
Now I gotta take this girl to prom. Cool.
So when I was rereading the book, I was like, is this set up? Like, are we supposed to figure out that Wallace is a gargoyle? And there are really few, if any, clues.
Yeah, very few clues. I think, the fact that they're both quiet is really the only connection.
Although I think when they're in the forest talking about Wallace, not knowing that the gargoyle is Wallace, I think he does sort of like react, but it's in a very ambiguous way that only in hindsight.
Yeah, it could be like completely just like teenagers, not a, they're talking about my butt.
I don't got a problem with you touching my butt, but I got a problem with you not touching my butt.
100%.
Because also, like, which one is his true form? Is the gargoyle his true form, or is Wallace his true form? Is he just like, oh, they're talking about my avatar's butt? Cool. Because the clothes that he wears are just sort of like his body.
Well, I think he sometimes, I don't know, it's hard to tell. Yeah, I think you're right.
But because I think like what had happened is like the pool clothes or the gym clothes they would wear, they would just kind of form onto his body. Same with the tux, same with the regular clothes that he would wear on other times. He just sort of morphs. So I'm like, so you just morph into a teenager? How old are you really?
Well, that's a good question. That's a valid question. But the only reason why I was a little uncertain about that is because after he is awoken, to coin a phrase, and they go to the hidden scales, which he doesn't go into because he doesn't think Effie's dad is going to like him too much. He turns back into Wallace, but he's completely naked. But then he does, it seems like an extra step for him to then put on clothes, although he's able to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's just like if he's embarrassed, like being in a forest listening to two teenagers talk about him as like, what do you think? Is he interested in you or whatever? Oh, you're going to the prom? Then like manifesting naked in front of them is another little embarrassing moment in the life of our boy Wallace.
Yeah, I would love the book from Wallace's point of view.
Oh man.
It's not his story, but man, I wish he told a chapter or two. But yeah, and I'm like, oh wait, there's all this other shit that we haven't even talked about either.
No, there totally is.
Like there's so many things in this book. And that's part of my problem with the book is that I think she packed a lot in here and it wasn't as well organized as it could have been. Like, they're in school and they're doing a school project and she's going to the forest with her classmate. And then maybe it's not a great idea to do this because she can hear the sprites, but maybe it's not the sprites. Maybe it's her dad. And also like, there's just a bunch of things that happen. And we haven't even talked about, Elric the second.
Oh, yeah, we sure haven't.
Who's like, part of the whole Ren Fair thing, is the story. And part of the story is Euphemia the Mer and Elric's courtship. And, always before the fair opens, she would start getting gifts and letters and things like that to sort of like keep up the appearance of this courtship.
Oh, I have a question about that.
I have a question too.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's the same question.
I think it might be.
Okay, go ahead.
Because she goes and she finds Elric, who's really this other dude. What's his name?
Rick.
Rick, just Rick.
I love it.
So she finds Rick and she sees him at the movies and she's like, what the fuck? She basically was like, break this down for me. Like, I'm really confused as to everything and here's my heart and please tell me what. And he's just like, bro, what? And she's like, but the letters, but the gifts, but the what? And I was like, was that her dad?
Oh no, well maybe. I thought it might be Wallace.
Well, it could have been either, I guess, but I'm just like, well, maybe it was Wallace on from the dad to keep up the story.
Oh, that's true. Oh.
Because I don't think that Wallace would have written all those things because he wasn't writing the story. But I thought the dad was maybe writing them because Rick was like, I don't know where you live.
That makes so much sense.
So I thought it was the dad keeping her interested in the fair because like her coming to the fair was her choice. She got to choose to go to the fair all the time. And her thing with Elric was like a really cool thing. Like she's like, oh, I get to be on this romance and it's gonna, it's this story that I'm part of, but it's gonna, it's evolving and here's where it's going. And I thought it was, at first I was like, oh, of course it's just Elric, playing the part and doing the thing. But when he said that, I was like, well, then who delivered them?
Well, there's a point in the book where Wallace as Gargoyle kind of reacts to the fact that a gift has been left in a way that is completely ambiguous. So who knows? But maybe Wallace is like uncomfortable with the fact that the father was there, and it seems like maybe it's significant that it happened while both of them were away, because we know that Gorgons don't like sirens being around because the sirens can make them not be invisible anymore.
They can do other things.
That's also true.
It's not just that they can make them not be invisible. That's just part of it.
Oh, one thing, well, you know what? There's no end to plot points.
There's so many plot points and there's so many like structural problems where like, if I could have just like broken the story down and like taken it all and like rearranged it a bit, I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But there's so much packed in here and it's a really quick read. So as we're talking about it, I'm like, oh yeah, that thing happened and that thing happened and that thing happened. There's a lot that happens in this book.
I agree. Like, I mean, obviously from the way I've talked about it, there are things about it that I found confusing and which, in fact, Carrie had to explain to me 5 minutes ago. I did enjoy it, reading it through, and then it was kind of fun to reread it and like find some of the stuff I missed. But I agree. I feel like it could have been structured in a way, and maybe some of the things like Isabella is a cool character who is in the end not given a whole lot to do. As you might guess based on the fact that this is the first time I've mentioned anyone named Isabella. Like Isabella is basically an Aloka who is nice.
Yeah.
And who gets turned to stone eventually, not by Effie.
But yeah, I mean, so that whole like thing about them going to do the project and then becoming friends, like that was fine, but they didn't need to do that in order to get her to go see the kids that she'd turned to stone. They could have done something else. And so I might have taken that out. I think it was really important that Tavia got stopped by the cops because, that's sort of a thing that happens to Black people in this country, is that they're stopped by the cops and her immediate thought is, oh shit, I'm going to die here. So when she uses her siren song on them, they sort of know it, but also don't and let her go.
And Priam's dad eventually like sort of figures out what's going on and like goes by the house and says, essentially suggests that Tavia might want to get one of those voice suppressors like Lexiano says.
Yeah, basically like, look, I'm a cool guy. I'm not going to say anything. However, if she doesn't get one of those things, I might have to say something.
So, I mean, I guess what I would say is like this book is like so brimming full of ideas, and a lot of them are like ideas that I like or would like to see explored more. And so maybe ultimately if it had been pruned down a bit.
I mean, it's a first novel, and I think it's
actually not though. It's a second.
It was it? Oh shit! Then just edit me smart.
No, I mean I understand why you would think that because
it feels like a first novel. It feels like, okay, this is someone who is figuring out their own siren voice, and it's sort of like bringing this to life. And their next novel is going to be so much different. But the thing is, I liked this book a lot. I mean, there wasn't anything I hated about it. I thought it was a good book. I just think it wasn't particularly well structured, and I think it wasn't particularly well designed as a book. I loved the story. I loved the characters, most of them. I loved some of the reveals. I loved the Wallace reveal so much.
The protest scene. Jake from the future here. And due to a software glitch, we lost some audio here. And so we're missing a few minutes, but we'll get back to the rest of the conversation right now. Okay. What the hell were we talking about? Do you remember?
We were talking about the hidden scales and the dad being a chode.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, I don't even really have a lot to say about him because I just think he was really, really selfish. And I didn't appreciate that. I mean, I was really mad at Mama Theo and Papa. They could have told her a lot more and sort of given her, I mean, maybe not when she was a little kid, but when she got a little older, and she kept asking. And she did say, look, after a while, I just stopped asking because the answer was the same. But it would have been nice if they had said, especially as she's going to these Ren fairs year after year alone, like giving her some tools in her toolbox. But they gave her nothing. And then were surprised when everything went fucking haywire.
In my notes here, if you didn't have a particular thing you wanted to talk about at the beginning, my opening question was going to be, so what do you think about Mama Theo and Papa's communication skills?
What communication skills?
Yeah, terrible.
Mama Theo, she saw her daughter die, and her daughter's husband is a Gorgon. Like, what do you do with that?
Admittedly, it's a unique,
or boyfriend or whatever. I don't remember what they're really. I don't think they were married, but I'm not entirely sure. But whatever it was, like that's some shit to deal with, of course. But Mama Theo, like you're a bad communicator, but you're also a really you're a strong chick. Like you take no shit, you give no fucks, but also talk, please.
Yeah.
But the same can be said for Tavia's dad. If he could only fucking talk a little bit instead of being like, well, my mom is dead and she was a siren and I don't want to talk about it because now you're a siren and I think you're going to be dead. She let her voice out when they were in California and they had to flee and go to Portland. They never let her deal with that. Therapy for everybody. Right. And we haven't really talked about, again, I'm not saying we should. We haven't really talked about Tavia's childhood, which is its own whole fucking thing. Yeah, real YA parenting. Yeah, that's basically what it boils down to. This is a YA book with YA parents. They suck. So, so this is me sort of trying to wrap things up, but we don't have to. Is there anything else you want to talk about? I feel like I've dogged on the book a lot, but I think at the same time, it was a really interesting book full of, some pretty well-written characters overall. I think, while the world building may have been a little confusing at times and the storyline may have been a little disjointed at times, I think that most of the characters were very, very strong and very well written, with a few exceptions. Isabella, meh. Even Altruism, meh. Yeah, Priam, we don't really know much about him other than that fact that, they dated for like a month and he bit her. Yeah, he bit her. What was that about? I forgot that part. One of the myths about the Yoloko is that they eat people. Which all educated people know is not actually true, but educated probably in quotes, but it's a myth. It's not actually correct. But when they're making out pretty severely and he gives her a hickey of some kind, he draws a little blood. And then both of them become super self-conscious about it, and they break up, or they stop seeing each other anyway. I don't think that they
have a conversation where they break up. They just sort of stop hanging out. I mean, this entire book is like this. You like pick a strand, pull on it. There's a whole thing. Along with what you said, some of the individual scenes are just written, I thought, really well and affectingly. And we've talked about some of those obviously as well.
Yeah, and I think it ends, with a lot of people more willing to talk, a lot more willing to sort of accept. So, Tavia's dad is kind of like, okay, this is who you are. I'm sorry I was a dick. Doesn't really excuse the fact that he was a dick for so long. But at least maybe they can move forward with the help of therapy.
Yes.
And, Tavia and Effie, they have their sisterhood back.
Yeah.
Because, one is really good for the other.
And Tavia has her own YouTube channel.
Because of course she does.
So I feel like we don't really know what we're going to do next episode. I mean, I guess we're probably going to go back to Sabrina for a bit.
Probably going to go back to Sabrina. I've got 2 classes this semester plus my master's thesis. So I've got a lot on my plate.
Yep, it's a lot. And the old Riverdale, of course.
Oh, Riverdale.
So hang out for that. We will return to books again at some point. I feel like this episode is the way it is partly because the book is the way it is, but also just because we haven't talked about a book in so long that we're just like,
we're like, how do we even do this?
Let's talk about the book. Let's keep talking about the book.
There's a lot of book.
There's a lot of
book.
book.
A lot more book than there are episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that was a thing we did. Have a nice life.
Yeah, we love you like crazy.
We do love you like crazy, and we miss you a lot.
We do.
Blah.
Bye.
Give me a call when you get back. Hey there.
Hey.
LoveLikeCrazy.com.
Oh, I forgot to talk to you about turkey legs.
Put it in as a bonus. Edit this in somewhere. Tell me about turkey legs, Jacob.
No, just that
what else are you gonna eat at a motherfucking Ren Fair?
Well, yeah. So you get them at the Ren Fair, obviously. My friend Marva, for some reason, is incredibly offended by them.
They are incredibly offensive.
And one of the ways that my friend Sarah redacted will get Marva's goat is to suggest, oh, we should get a turkey leg when we go to King Richard's Fair. And Marva gets so mad.
So then at least Sarah redacted can get said turkey leg, eat it by herself, hold the bone over her head like a goddamn warrior.
I think Sarah thinks they're kind of gross too.
They're super gross, but also delicious, but also there is no turkey on earth that makes a leg that big.
No.
It's like with this weird pressed meat composite. I don't know. Maybe that's just my imagination, but I don't think turkeys are that big. Full stop, the end.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to stop recording.
Okay.